Hey, Vlad here, devinsidey.com. Welcome to another video. Today we're going to play around with Scala FMT, which is a code formatter for Scala. Let's get right to it. Now, before we begin, let me say a few words about formatting in general, why it is important, and why it should be automated as much as possible. Humans are very visual beings. This has some evolutionary background. Knowing your terrain increases the chances of survival. Knowing what you can eat and what you can't, knowing where to hide from wildlife, and in case you're in military, knowing all the tactical points, and even if you're playing a computer game that simulates military action, knowing the map gives you a clear advantage. Since this visual sort of pattern matching, for the lack of a better word, is so deeply ingrained in our brains, it's kind of hard to turn it off. When we're in an unfamiliar environment, we don't feel at ease. And I don't want to dwell on this point. It's not like we burst out into panic only because we're in the middle of an unknown street. All I'm saying is that we don't feel as comfortable as sitting at home or, for example, in your favorite restaurant. Now, what does this have to do with programming? Well, if you're looking at some code, your brain doesn't only try to understand its meaning, it also tries to recognize its shape. So when you're looking at some code that you have seen before, maybe because you have written it, it will feel familiar. And because it will feel familiar, you will feel comfortable reading it. And because you will be comfortable, you will also spend less mental energy, which sounds useful. Wouldn't you agree? By the way, I believe that this is an appropriate point to mention that I'm not a brain scientist, so take everything that I just said with a grain of salt. And if you're new to this channel, I like to philosophize sometimes, and if that's not your cup of tea, no hard feelings. Since it is safe to assume that everyone wants to feel comfortable, reading unfamiliarly shaped code should be avoided. This is easier said than done, however, because most software these days is not written by only one person, and even if you could write it, you constantly evolve your code anyway, so you will probably not recognize the code that you have written a couple of years ago yourself. So let's say that you're a CTO or a tech lead of a team of developers. How do you make sure that the code that they produce looks familiar to all of them? The beginning of the answer are style guides, and each language has their own. For instance, the one for Scala is right here. So if you go to the home page, you can find it when clicking on documentation and then on style guide like this. So you end up at docscalalang.org/style/index.html, and all the links are going to be down in the description. Now, if you can scroll up and down, there's indentation, there's name conventions, and all of the good things. So if you go, for example, click at line wrapping, you will see a bunch of text, and as a usual busy developer, you're just going to scroll down and look at the examples. Like, for example, this one, this indentation is right, and this indentation is wrong. By the way, this is sort of unrelated, but what we just did is actually related to this sort of visual pattern matching that I mentioned in the beginning. Maybe in this case, it would have been better to design the page in such a way that you see the examples first, like it's done. Stum was the first one. Okay, this is indentation. You see the example first, and then you have some text explaining it. But then it changes over here, right? So see here, you see a bunch of text, and then an example, right? So our brains are really good at this. We just scroll down, looked at the example, and it was clear. And in case it wouldn't have been clear, we could just keep scrolling down and reading it. All right, but I'm not a UX expert, so I'm not going to judge myself. But the next time you're designing a website or something, think about this. In any case, the existence of a style guide poses a challenge on its own. It assumes that everyone is familiar with it and also keeps tabs on it. Fortunately, a style guide is exactly what it is. It is a guide and not a set of hard-written rules. It should be used as a basis for our own internal style guide, but no matter what you do, there has to be a style guide, because otherwise every developer will write the code that is familiar to him and not his teammates. Now, assuming that our team has a style guide, how do we make sure that the style guide is followed and even that every developer is aware of it, especially the new guys? Well, we're programmers. There has to be a tool that can help us with that. And these tools are called linters, and there are more than one. And since this video is not about linters, I'm just going to show you only one called Scala Style. There are multiple ways to install it, but the most prominent one is probably to use it as an SBT plugin, which will give you a Scala style command, which will run through your code and simply lint it. It will show you all the violations of your code. So what I have here is a project called FP Library. It's the one that we have written during the Monad series, and I have installed this plugin just by going to plugins.sbt and adding this one line. Again, this video is not about linters, which is why I'm not going to type all of this out. And then we also have a file called scalastyle-config XML that I stole from the Apache Spark project, right? So it's a bunch of XML here which configures everything properly. So by default, Scala style lints your code according to the Scala style guide, and if you configure it however you want, then it will also lint your rules, right? So we can go into SBT over here, and I can just type in Scala style, and it's just a syntactic parser, right? So it will tell you, okay, header doesn't match expected text. There's a bunch of warnings, a bunch of errors. There's no space before this token. Let's actually jump in there. Why didn't it jump in there? Why did it jump down actually? Hold up, where was it? Over here. Let's jump in there. I don't understand why it doesn't jump in there. All right, well then let's open it ourselves. It's maybe in line 44, column 22. So okay, so over here we actually have two spaces, but it actually says no space before token because it's probably assumed that there will be only one space. I'm not really sure. Well, that's definitely a step in the right direction, but let's be honest, nobody wants to go through their code and indent it according to some gigantic document, even if you have a cool tool like this that lists all the violations for you. Can we do better than that? Yes, we can. Instead of having a tool that simply lists all the violations, why don't we have a tool that actually rewrites our code according to the style guide? We have two formatters in the Scala ecosystem. One is called Scalariform and the other one is called the Scala FMT. We have been using Scalariform in the Homegrown Collection series, but it's sort of slowly dying out and is being replaced with Scala FMT, which is part of the Scala Meta project and in general part of this whole Scala Metals toolchain, which the previous few videos were about. Scala FMT can be used as a command line tool. You simply give it a file or a directory and it will go and format all of it. It can also be used as an SBT plugin and automatically format your code if you wish. It will also give you an SBT command to format it on command. It can even be integrated directly in your IDE, and depending on which IDE you're using, it might even be able to format your code every time you save the file. If you look at the Scala FMT installation page, it actually advises you to integrate it into the editor instead of formatting your code on compile from your build tool. It says this option is discouraged since it messes up undo buffers in the editor and it slows down compilation. It is recommended to use format unsafe in the editor instead. Now, on one hand, it makes sense, but if you remember, our goal was to sort of enforce that every developer uses a tool like this, and the easiest way to do this would actually be to integrate it into SBT. And SBT is smart enough because it uses the Zing compiler behind the scenes, not to format the file, the things that have already been formatted, and also not even to send the command to Scala FMT to format something if the compilation command didn't happen. There are also some other more fine-grained solutions to this. For instance, you could write a simple script. In fact, a Scala FMT gives you a command to check if the code is formatted, and then it will just blow up. And so you could integrate this into your continuous integration server. And then if the code turns out not to be formatted, you know, the developer who committed the code will get an email, and then he would need to format it and push it again. Another solution to this would be to use Git's precommit hooks, and there's actually a cool blog about it that came out recently. I'm going to have a link down in the description. Essentially, if you use that, then Git will not allow you to commit if the code is not formatted. It would use a similar hook into Scala FMT, which will basically blow up if the code is not formatted, right? But you know, no matter what I do, even these Git hooks, they still require some manual installation on the part of you know, every developer in your team, of your team, especially the new guys, right? So no matter what you pick, there is always something that needs to be a little bit configured, unfortunately. All right, so what we'll do for the rest of the video is we're gonna set up a Hello World project and play around with some Scala FMT rules a little bit. We will also install the CLI just because we can. All right, so I'm using an Ubuntu 18.04 virtual machine. So let me open the terminal, let me go to dev, and let me see what I have there. Just FP library and playground. Okay, so let's create a directory and we're gonna call it Scala FMT playground like this. So let's go in there. Or actually, we don't even need to go in there. We can just say code like that. Okay, we can close the terminal, and in just a couple of seconds, VS Code is going to start like this. All right, so let's create a file in there, and we're going to have it under project build.properties like this, and we're going to use sbt.version equals 1.2.8 like that. And let's also create another one. Okay, so this is going to be plugins.spt. We're going to change it later. I wanted to start by creating a build file, build.spt. Okay, all that we will do is we'll say Scala version equals to 13.0, and we're also going to turn off the server. Okay, like this. All right, so now let's also add the plugin. I'm just going to say add spt plugin from org.scala meta. And it's going to be spt-scala FMT, and the version is going to be 2.0.0. Okay, and for now we're going to go to the build file and we will enable the Scala FMT on compile. I'm going to set it to true like this. Let me also create a file called .scalafmt.conf like this, and all we need to have there is version equals 2.0.0. 0. Okay, so now let's go and create a new file, source main Scala, main.scala, like this. And because I don't want to waste your time, I'm just going to copy paste something from my script. It's just a hello world essentially, like this. All right, so let's go and start SPT. And in fact, you know what, I think my metals is disabled. Let me go and check. Metals enable, like this. Okay, because we also want to use formatting directly from metals. Okay, so it should wake up right now. Yes, it did wake up. So I'm just gonna import the build, and while it imports the build, I'm gonna go to terminal over here. In fact, I'm gonna press escape so that the notification goes away. In the meantime, I can actually open SPT like this while metals is still doing something in the background. Let's see. It almost started, and it waits for the log because now the import is happening. I'm just gonna cut it out of the video if it gets too long, but it should be done in just a few seconds. All right, so it's done. Let me press Control L and run it once, and we should see it right away. Compiling, formatting. Yeah, so we already see that it actually formatted this one file, even though it was already formatted, right? So we can, so I can press spaces a few times, and if I press Control S, it will actually format it in the terminal. As you can see, SBT is not running. It is formatted in the terminal. Sorry, not in the terminal, in VS Code, because I have a setting. If I go Control Shift P, settings, and I want JSON, and I'm gonna look for it's called something unsafe. Yeah, editor format unsafe, and I have it set to true. So if I disable that, and I'm gonna go back to main, and I'm gonna ruin the formatting a little bit. I'm gonna save the file, nothing happened. But if in SPT I'm gonna compile it, it's going to realize that it needs to recompile this one file, and because of that, it's gonna ask Scala FMT to format it, because in our build file we said that it should do that on compile. So if we have this setting disabled, we can still do it manually, right? So we can go over here. Notice that SPT is not running; it's not continuously compiling anything. So I ruined this. I'm pressing Control S, nothing happened. But now I can press Control Shift I, and it actually formatted everything, and I can ruin it again, save it again. You can also do Control Shift P and then something like LSP format. No, just format document, this one. Yeah, as you can see, Control Shift I. Press enter, bam, it formatted. It obviously formatted only this one file. Okay, let me save it. Now, because we have the SPT plugin installed, we can also do it manually from the SPT plugin. So let me ruin the indentation again, and I can go over here and I can type Scala FMT, and we actually don't need the sidebar. Let me collapse the sidebar like this. All right. So let me actually press Control L. Okay, so we can do Scala FMT, and I can press Tab, and it will show us auto completion. And we have, for example, a command like Scala FMT check, right? So for example, this one, and it will try to compile and see and say, hey, one file must be formatted, main.scala, blah blah blah. Okay, so how do we actually do this? Well, we just say Scala FMT, and that's all. Scala FMT, now it's formatted, and if you say Scala FMT check, now it says that everything is fine. You can also do Scala FMT all, and it will also format your test files if you have any. And what you can also do is you can say Scala FMT SBT. I didn't press enter because I want to open a build file, and I don't know, do something like this in there. What else can I do? Maybe one more empty line like this. I'm gonna go save it, and I'm gonna go type that, and bam, it's formatted. Another thing that I want to show you is that contrary to Scalariform, if you remember in Scalariform, if you would ask it to format something like this, it would say formatting, and then if it were actually format something, it would say reformatted. Scala FMT doesn't do that. It just says formatting one file, and if it does something, then it does something, and if it doesn't do anything, then, well, it doesn't do anything. All right, so the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to install the CLI, and I'm just going to open a different tab over here. Now, you need to install Corsair first, and for that you need curl or curl, which is installed on Ubuntu by default. But let's just check apt install -y curl or curl, and there's no hyphen like this. There we go. All right, and now it actually says that it installed, and it also says the following packages were automatically installed and are no longer required. Do sudo auto remove to remove them. All right, so let's do that. Sudo apt auto remove like this. All right, yes, I want to remove 67 megs. There we go, something is happening, and now it's gone. All right, so Control L, let's do curl again like this, and now it just says that it is installed, right? So you can, for example, curl https:// google.com, and it should see it should say, hey, that it redirected to somewhere else. Anyway, essentially curl is just an HTTP tool you can make, get and post requests. Okay. Now the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to install Corsair, which is just a package fetcher, or I'm going to call it jar fetcher. And because I actually, it's not the first time that I'm installing this, I actually got tired of this, and I prepared install script for well, for me and also for you guys. So if you go to install.devinsideyou.com, it will redirect you to my GitHub page, and it will put the install hyphen query into the repositories. And I have a bunch of install hyphen scripts. And what you can also do is you can in fact go install.devinsideyou.com, and then you can do /, and for example you could say Scala FMT, which is what we're going to install, right? So it will add that to the query. So it actually now searched for install hyphen Scala FMT, and it found install Scala FMT hyphen CLI. So let's go there. Okay, and it says have these installed before you start, right? So if you can, so it says that you need Corsair. So if you go to Corsair, let's open it in a different tab. It basically says that these two commands, it will install the latest version of Corsair CLI on Ubuntu. Like most of the install scripts that I have are going to work for Ubuntu. And for this one, you can also specify the version of Corsair that you have. Now, all of these scripts are designed in such a way that no matter how complicated the installation looks like, for you, it's always just these two commands, right? So the first one is always the downloading of the script, which is always called install something something.sh, and the second line just makes it executable and runs it. So in this particular case, we're actually going to go into the install script, and we're going to see what it's doing. So the first part is just figuring out if the parameter was passed, and if the parameter wasn't passed, then it just goes to this URL, and if the parameter was passed, then it actually goes to this URL. After that, all it does is it installs using curl Corsair into user local bin Corsair, and because user local bin Corsair is on the path, we will be able to use Corsair right away. Okay. So you can just go through all of these scripts at your own pace. All we need to do is we need just to copy paste these two lines. We're going to go over here. We're going to press Ctrl L. We're going to paste them. It will ask me for my password probably. Okay, I already typed it in, right? So it does something, it downloads something, and then it says Corsair is now on the path, right? So you can do Corsair -help, for example, and it should do exactly the same thing that it already printed out over there. Now the next thing that we need is actually Scala FMT. So if we go over there, Scala FMT, we need Corsair. We already have Corsair, so now we're copying these lines. In this case, it will download this file. I can actually open it over here, right? And it will use Corsair to download. You can also specify the versions, and it will also put it into the user local bin Scala FMT. And it will also, it uses the force flag, so it will override the version that you have in case you already have something. Okay, so let's go back, paste them in, press enter, and it's downloading something, and Scala FMT should be on the path in just a few seconds. So as you can see, it uses Corsair to download a bunch of stuff. That's why, that's why we needed to have it installed. And now it says Scala FMT is now on the path. It also gives you the version. Okay, so we can do Scala FMT also ourselves -- version like this. Okay, cool. Now, because we're in the same folder, we can actually ruin some formatting over here like this, and we can now just type Scala FMT. Notice that we're not inside of SPT, right? So this is just the CLI. So we can do this, and it should do something. Yeah, so it fixed the indentation. And the next thing that we can do is we can also let me do that. We can also pass in a folder. For example, we can say Scala FMT source main Scala, for example, like this. So it will find this folder and format it for us. And also we can go even further, and we can say that it should format specifically this one file, like this, main.scala. Okay. Now, the next thing that we can do is we can ruin the formatting again, and we can ask it just to test, right? --test like this, and it should say, hey, it's actually not formatted. I was expecting this, but you did that. Okay, and let's format everything again, and also ask it again to run the test like this. There we go. All files are formatted with Scala FMT, which is awesome. And the last thing that we're going to do is we're going to call the help command. And I'm also going to increase the size. And these are all the cool things that you can do with the Scala FMT CLI. All right, so let me actually destroy this terminal, because for the rest of the video, we're actually going to use the VS Code built-in formatting on save, right? Which again, it just sends it to the LSP client, and the LSP client sends it to Metals, and Metals sends it to Scala FMT. Okay, so for the rest of the video, we're just going to be able to save the file, and then bam, it just formatted. I mean, in fact, for now, I'm even going to I'm not going to close this PT, but I'm actually just going to collapse the terminal so that we have more space. VS Code just released a new version, and I have no idea what this pencil means. What does it mean? Seems like it points to the last line. I can't right click it, I can't left click it if I have something. No, I have no idea what that is, what this symbol means. All right, now as most of the formatting tools, Scala FMT, in fact, Scala FMT might actually understand a little bit of the semantics of your code, but you know it's not always correct, right? So, for example, it is a common pattern to express precedence of the operators when you're writing math expressions. So, for example, if you have something simple like 2 times 6, and then you can have plus. You know, you can have space plus space again 5 times 6, right? So because the multiplication has higher precedence, you write them together, and because you know, plus has a lower precedence, you know, you have a space there, right? So it's visually very, very pleasing, but obviously Scala FMT does not understand this, right? So if you save, it will actually ruin this. Now, similarly to Scalariform, you can disable it by using comments. So you can go here and say format off, and over here format on. Okay, so if we duplicate that, you know, the one at the top is going to be left alone, but everything below is actually going to be formatted. By the way, in case this is not obvious, there's obviously some overlap between clean code and style guides and all of this formatting stuff. And most of the times they agree, but sometimes, as you can see over here, they don't agree. And so it's good that you have a way to, you know, to turn it off sometimes. What I just showed you is a typical clean code thing. It goes by the name of horizontal openness or density, and we also have vertical openness. For example, you know, I'm using empty lines over here, and it's very typical. You know, if you have a package, you know, you want to have an empty line over here, so it's a typical example of a vertical openness. And I also like to denote the return expressions from a function, right? So for example, if I have print line to green hello world over here, and if to green is just a function over here which takes some input and produces the same string. Okay, so if I have, for example, green, which is console dot green, green, and if I have reset, which is called console dot reset, okay, then I'm going to have an empty line over here before I have my return thing, right? So I can say green plus input plus reset like this. Okay, let's actually run it once. There we go. We see hello world in green now. Okay, so I used this, you know, in this case, the vertical openness to make it more, you know, visually pleasing. Okay, and in this case, this is horizontal openness, and this is horizontal density. Okay, let's remove that again, like this. We're actually not interested in running much code today. I kind of miss writing code. In any case, now clean code is a topic for another video, but allow me to give you one advice. If you're a subscriber to my channel, then chances are that you're a typical backend developer. And if you have ever tried to create a website and it looked good to you, but not really so pleasant to others, and they were complaining, but they couldn't, you know, verbalize why, chances are that this whole lack of openness, right, this whole density was probably the reason. So the next time you're doing something like this, just be very, very generous with padding and margin, and also use a custom font. Just these two things alone, they will make your websites look more professional. Okay, let's finally start talking about some Scala FMT rules. Now, one of the selling points of Scala FMT is that, contrary to Scalariform, Scala FMT only runs some of the rules when your code gets too long, when it gets past some max column. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to VS Code, again to the settings, and we're going to ask it to display some editor rulers. Maybe I actually have it already. No, I don't. Okay, so let's just go somewhere over here and say editor dot rulers like this, and this is an array, so you can have multiple rulers, right? So we can have one for 80, for example. Okay, but we could have multiple, right? So for example, 80 and 85. So we see one here and one there. Okay, let's remove the one for 85. Okay, all right, so we have the 80. So now let's go over here and create an example. So let's go and just create a bunch of traits. So we're gonna have trait 1. Let's duplicate this a few times. So there's going to be 2, this is going to be 3, this is going to be 4, this is going to be 5, and obviously I actually, whoa, what did I just do? I obviously don't want to have, how does it work in VS Code again? There we go, like this. We don't want a space over here, okay? So now if we go over here and we say extends app with trait 1, save, it's fine. With trait 2, save, it's fine. With trait 3, save, it's fine. With trait 4, save, it's fine. With trait 5, and now it's longer than 80, and now it's going to do this, right? So it's going to jump around like this. Okay, so what I want to show you is that if we click over here, which is the last place we see at the bottom of here, this is the column 85. Okay, so if we go over here and ask it to display also the 85, and if we go, yeah, see, this is the 85, and if we go to Scala FMT conf, then we can say max column equals 85, right? And now if we save the file, it shouldn't do anything, right? So if we go and set it to 84, for example, then it should fix it. Why doesn't it do it? Max column, there we go, column. So let's do 85 first, like this. It's still underlined red, but I believe this time it should be fine. And if we set it to 84, then it should, yeah, so now it's formatted. Okay, right, so let's go and have 80 again, because 80 is fine. The typical values are 80, 100, and 120. Okay, so let's go over here. Let's just manually set it to 80. I have no idea why it's underlined red. Actually, I couldn't figure out how to get rid of it. I closed the file, I reopened the file. The only thing that actually helped was to restart VS Code. What does it actually say? Invalid field max column. Yeah, so see, it shows still the old error message, max column, not max column. And for some reason, if I'm moving my cursor, then the pop-up disappears. I hate pop-ups in IDEs. Anyway, let me restart VS Code real quick. Click, click, and Sublime is faster, but you know, it restarted. One other thing, if you're worried about this whole jumping around, right? So if you go like this and oh yeah, I restarted VS Code. I was pressing Control Z right now. Okay, so if we go like this, and let's say that I went to trait 5 over here, right? I'm going to press Alt F3 that all of them are marked, right? So my cursor is now at the top over there and at the bottom over here. So let's say I want to rename it to 6, for example. And in fact, in this case, I actually don't need to rename anything, right? So I'm pressing 5. Now, when I'm going to press save, it's going to indent all of them, right? But my cursor is still going to stay there, right? So it's all going to be fine. So I'm going to press save. And as you can see, my cursor, it's now on line 21 and not on line whatever it was, 15. Okay, so you know, you don't really notice that it sort of jumps around a little bit. Now let's actually go to the website and see what we actually can play around with. So we have already seen max column. There is also a line, but we're going to see a line in just a few seconds. For now, I want to show you how to read these rules. For example, there you have it. You have a rule for doc strings. So the default strings, the default version is Scala Doc, and if you have this thing, so you can always click here on show original. In fact, let me increase the font a little bit. You see the show original, and if you wanted to format a Scala Doc, then you click over here and it's going to align everything by the second asterisk. Okay, and so if you want to have this this example, then this is what you need to configure. But as you can see, by default it is already configured like this. And by the way, if you see some mistakes over here, you can actually go to Scala FMT and then click on docs and then contributing website MD, right? So I always recommend people to contribute especially to documentation, right? So there's a documentation how to do it, and it says over here, for simple changes to the documentation, click on the edit button at the top of each page and submit those changes directly to GitHub. So if we go to configuration, if we actually go up, there's an edit page, right? So click over there, start from there. All right, so the rule that we're going to play around with is going to be this assume standard library strip margin. Okay, so in fact we're going to show the original. We're going to copy that, going to paste it over. I don't know. Let's actually not have these traits like that. Let's actually remove them from here as well. We actually also don't need this one. Okay, so I'm gonna do this. I'm going to save the file. So something jumped around, but it actually did not fix these. Okay, so let's go over here, and it says the default is false. So if you want it to format like that, we need to do that. So we can copy here. We can go to Scala FMT. We can go and paste it like that. We can go back to here. We can save the file. Bam, it's formatted. It also respects if you have a pipe over here like this, then we actually format the others like that. Ignore this. This is just indentation rendering from VS Code. So if I click over here, it will actually disappear. So the way I usually do it is actually like this. And the cool thing about it is actually I know where it's coming from, if it's coming from metals or maybe from VS Code right away. So if I press enter over here, it will actually insert this pipe, and I really, really love it. It's actually a bit annoying if we press enter, for example. So if I press control enter, right, so then I don't have to be at the end of the line. I can just press control enter over here to go to the next line, but it will actually insert this pipe. Well then, just use backspace to remove it, and then it's all good. Now let's use one of these align thingies. At the top you see the popular configuration, which is the max column, and the align one. So align, where is it? Indentation, call sign, blah blah blah. Here, align. Okay, so you need to understand that this align rule, and most actually, like not most, but a lot of Scala FMT or in general like formatting tools, they sometimes produce things that create unnecessary Git diffs, right? And then it's a bit annoying to review your code. So be very gentle with these align rules, because you can set it to none, you can set it to some, you can set it to more, and you can set it to most. Okay, so in fact, what we're going to do is we're going to do align more. We're going to go and we're going to paste it in like that, and we're going to have a simple example where we're going to have val hello equals hello. I'm going to have val world equals world. Now I'm going to have an empty line over here, okay, like this. I'll Scala FMT remove the empty line. I'm going to have friend like this. Okay, now as soon as I remove this empty line, then Scala FMT will think that this is a group, and it will format them to look like this. Okay, and you have the same, the same things for pattern matching. For example, if we go and say friend match case A, arrow to the right, save, it's going to look like this. And if we go and say case AA, and then arrow to the right and save it, then this arrow just jumped, right? So if we have a third one, it's going to be like this. We have case friend like this, save it. All of them are just going to move like these. Okay, so let me remove this actually, all of these. Let's see, what do we have? Align tokens. Yeah, so you can customize a lot. You can scroll through this on your own. There's just a just a few that I actually want to show you. Like for example, new lines, rewrite rules. Okay, so the rewrite rules is actually kind of important. So let's do that. And the rewrite rule that we're going to use is actually going to be sort modifiers. Okay, sort modifiers like this. Cool. So if we go to main over here, and we're going to create a private implicit final val world equals world. If we save it, then it will sort all of these, right? So we'll do implicit final private instead. Okay, so what you can do also is you can configure it even more, right? So you can say rewrite dot sort modifiers dot order equals, and now you need to specify all of them, right? So for example, we can say final, we can say sealed, we can say abstract. You really have to specify all of them, right? Override. Let's go to this line. Okay, let's say implicit, let's say private, let's say protected, and let's say lazy, like this. Okay, so we go over here, save the file. Now it's sorted differently. Next thing that I'm going to show you is the HOCON specification. So if we go to here, which is a configuration library by Lightband, and they created their own thing called human optimized config object notation, right? So if you click on syntax, it's basically JSON, but it looks a bit more fancy. Okay, the link is going to be down in the description. You can play around with yourself. So what I wanted to show you is that these conf files are actually written in this HOCON specification. So as you can see, we have this rewrite and dot. So instead we can do this. So we can just open a curly brace like that and do it like that. So it's basically going to look like JSON. Okay, let me comment these out like this. I was hoping that it would format them like this. Okay, right? So these two settings, they belong to this rewrite rule, right? And you can keep going like for this one, right? So the sort modifiers, it probably doesn't only have order, it probably has even more settings. Okay, so let me go here, I press Ctrl Z, let me save the file, and as you can see, our rule actually works. In the upcoming videos, we will actually see how to create our own rules. They will technically not be Scala FMT rules, they will be Scala Fix rules. And Scala Fix is a tool that Scala FMT uses behind the scenes, and they were created by the same guy. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to show you is long methods. All right, so we're going to have a method. We're going to have a first parameter, which is a string. We're going to have a second parameter, which is a string. We're going to have another parameter list like this. I'm going to have a third parameter, which is a string. We're going to have a fourth parameter. Notice the soft wrapping that comes from VS Code. This is just a setting. Okay, so this is still the same line. Okay, fourth parameter, also a string, and we're going to have yet another list, which is going to have implicit fifth parameter, which is a string, and sixth parameter, which is also a string. This whole thing produces a unit because all it does is just print line hello world. Now if I save it like this, Scala FMT will format it somehow, and you can configure exactly what it will do. So what I like to do is actually to go all the way. So what I like to do is I want to go here and I want to say vertical multi-line, right? So again, it's HOCON. So you can go over here and say for this setting, I want to have the arity threshold. So what I would recommend is to use the half of your max column in general. So if you have 80, use 40 or maybe something like 60. Let's do 60. So we're going to have arity threshold 60, and then we're going to say at definition side true. I'm going to say that we want a new line. New line. Do we have auto completion? No, we don't. Okay, new line after implicit keyword is true. Okay, so over here, and we want to have a new line over here. Then what else? We want a new line after open paren. Okay, so let's see. So if we have the open parentheses over here, we want a new line over here, we want a new line over here, we want a new line over here, and we also want a new line before implicit keyword like this. Okay, so maybe let's have it like this. So before implicit, after open paren. Okay, let's save this, let's save that, and it didn't do anything because it considers this already as formatted. So if we go back like this and press save now, then it should actually format it differently unless I ruin something. Let's go and check this again. It's probably complaining because of this. It should say arity like this. Let's see. No. Arity at defn side, that looks fine. What else? New line before implicit keyword, new line after open paren. That should all be fine. Something is still wrong. Let's see. Invalid field vertical multiline. Oh, okay. This L should be a small L. Okay. Let me restart VS Code again like this. And we'll probably need to load all of these things again. So we need to wait a little bit. Let's actually go and try to save. Didn't do anything yet. Where are my pop-ups? I miss you. There we go. Okay, so let's see. Okay, now everything is fine. Okay, so main, save, and now it formatted everything beautifully. Okay, so we have a new line after a parenthesis, before implicit keyword, after implicit keyword. So now it sort of looks, it's still very huge. You shouldn't have methods like these, but still, at least we have a formatting tool that can fix it all for us, right? Okay, so let's ruin it all again. Control J to join all of the lines, save it, and then bam. Okay, it didn't do this one. Let's do that. Yeah, so now it moved this one line. We're gonna stop playing right now, but obviously if you want to keep playing, just keep scrolling down this page and play with all of these settings. If you want to see all of the settings, then you can go to where do I have it? It's over here. I'm gonna have the link down in the description. This is basically the Scala representation of the configuration file. So all of these are just comments, but here this is the case class with all of the settings, right? So you can use exactly this for in your configuration file. Now, one thing that you need to know is that there is this rule called redundant braces, and it says warning, the rewrite can cause non-idempotent formatting. What this means is that Scala FMT might format if you're using this rule, it might format your code in such a way that the next time you ask it to format it, it will not realize that it already has been formatted, and so it will format it again, okay, and then again, and then again, and then again, right? So this is sort of like a I don't want to say bug because it's more like a limitation, because apparently there's like a big design issue that prevents it from being fixed, but I'm sure that in the future it's gonna be fixed. Okay, just for now, I would recommend like simply to avoid this rule entirely. Another thing that I want to mention is that I'm a minimalistic kind of guy, so what we just did here, just these few things, is actually all that I would use. But I'm not gonna stop you from using all the bells and whistles of Scala FMT. Go for it. I don't mind. But with these tools, you have to be really careful, and the less you use, the better usually. In fact, I think I'm going to show you one more rule, and it's called prefer curly fors, like this. So if I go over here, let me throw this out. So if I have a for comprehension, which builds up my, the typical chessboard example that I always have. So if we have the character that comes from A to H and semicolon, and if you have a number that comes from 1 to 8 like this, then I want to ask it to yield a character and tuple, right? So if I save it now, it will rewrite the entire for comprehension to curly braces, and it will also remove the semicolon, which I think is kind of cool. Alright, and that's all I got for you today. It's been Vlad, devinsider.com. Don't forget to like this video if you did, subscribe if you want to improve the developer inside you, and if you find my videos valuable, consider supporting me on Patreon, but most importantly, take care.